The machines never stopped beeping. Maya Chin-Williams pressed her palms against her burning eyes as the ventilator hissed its mechanical rhythm beside her grandmother's hospital bed. 2 in the morning, and she was still here, still watching the numbers on the monitors that meant everything and nothing all at once. The third double shift this week, and her body screamed for rest, but rest was a luxury she couldn't afford when Grandma Essie's medical bills kept climbing toward the ceiling like smoke. Have you ever had one of those middly-off-the-night moments where desperation makes you do something you'd never normally do? Maybe you're watching this from somewhere warm and safe, but I bet you know that feeling when panic overrides logic. Comment below and let me know where you're watching from tonight, because Maya was about to make the kind of mistake that changes everything. Her phone buzzed with another past-due notice. Maya's fingers trembled as she scrolled through her contacts, looking for her brother Marcus's new number. He'd switched carriers last week, something about better coverage for his construction crew. The screen blurred through her exhaustion, numbers swimming together like alphabet soup. She found what looked right and typed with desperate speed. "Marcus, I need help. Grandma's oxygen levels dropped again, and they want to move her to ICU, but insurance won't cover it without another authorization. I'm $847 short for the deposit. Please. I've never asked for this much, but I don't know what else to do." The message went through with a soft whoosh. Maya leaned back in the uncomfortable visitor chair, watching Grandma Essie's chest rise and fall with mechanical precision. The old woman's dark skin looked ashen under the harsh fluorescent lights. Her silver hair spread across the pillow like spun moonlight. She'd raised Maya after her parents died, worked 3 jobs to put her through nursing school, never once complained about the sacrifices. Now Maya was the one working multiple jobs, trying to return the favor, trying to keep the woman who'd been her anchor from slipping away. 3 hours later, as Maya finally dozed in the chair, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. The voice that came through was nothing like Marcus. Deep, controlled, with the faintest trace of an accent that sounded like expensive silk wrapped around steel. "Do you make a habit of texting strangers at 2 in the morning? Or am I receiving a message meant for someone else?" Maya's blood turned to ice water. She jerked fully awake, nearly dropping the phone. "I'm sorry, I think I texted the wrong number. Please just delete it." The pause stretched long enough for her to hear her own heartbeat. The man's voice, when it came again, carried a strange quality she couldn't identify. Dangerous curiosity, perhaps. "You mentioned your grandmother. Is she in a hospital now?" Maya's nurse training kicked in, the part that dealt with difficult patients and impossible situations. "Yes, but it's not your concern. I apologize for bothering you." Another pause. This time she heard something in the background, voices speaking what sounded like Korean, the clink of expensive glassware. "Where are you?" The question sent warning bells through her exhaustion. "That's not information I'm giving to a stranger. Look, I'm sorry about the text. Just forget this happened." She hung up before he could respond, her hands shaking. Maya stared at the phone like it might bite her. Who talked like that? And why had his voice done something strange to her pulse, even through her fear? 20 minutes later, as she was gathering courage to call the real Marcus, her phone buzzed with a text from the same unknown number. The message was simple, terrifying in its precision. "Portland General Hospital, room 314. I will be there in 30 minutes. Maya's blood turned to Arctic wind. How did he know where she was? How could anyone trace a phone number that quickly? Her nursing experience with security protocols screamed that this was wrong, dangerous, the kind of situation where normal people called the police. But something in his voice, the controlled authority of it, made her hesitate. She could pack up and leave. Move Grandma Essie to a different hospital, disappear into the night shift shuffle. But Grandma was stable here, and the doctors knew her case. Moving her could be more dangerous than staying. Maya was still debating when the elevator chimed down the hall. Visiting hours had been over since 10, but she heard footsteps, confident and unhurried, moving with the kind of authority that suggested security guards stepped aside rather than question. Her door was partially open, and through the gap she saw a figure approaching. The man who appeared in her doorway was nothing like what she'd expected and everything her instincts had warned her about. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. His black hair was styled with precision, his face sharp-featured and undeniably handsome in a way that seemed almost engineered for intimidation. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. Dark, intelligent, and completely focused on her with an intensity that felt like being studied by a predator deciding whether you were prey or competition. He stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the room with those calculating eyes. Grandma Essie on the bed, surrounded by machines. Maya in her scrubs, exhaustion written in every line of her body, but her spine straight with the kind of strength that came from carrying the world on her shoulders. "You are not what I expected," he said, stepping into the room without invitation. His voice was the same controlled silk she remembered, but in person it carried weight, presence that seemed to fill the sterile space. Maya stood, her nurse training overriding her fear. "Sir, visiting hours are over, and you can't be here without family permission. I don't know who you are or how you found us, but you need to leave." He closed the door behind him with deliberate care. "I am Jinwoo Park. You contacted me requesting money for your grandmother's medical care. I came to assess the situation personally." The way he said his name carried weight, like it should mean something to her. The formal cadence of his speech, the expensive clothes, the confidence that let him walk into a secured hospital floor after hours. Maya's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. "I told you it was a mistake. I'm going to text my brother. You shouldn't have come here." Maya's voice stayed steady, but she positioned herself between him and Grandma Essie's bed. Jinwoo's dark eyes shifted to the monitors, taking in the numbers with surprising understanding. Then his gaze returned to her face, and something shifted in his expression. Not softer, exactly, but more complex. "Your grandmother is stable, but her condition is serious. The insurance authorization you mentioned, it is a significant amount." He moved closer, and Maya caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something else. Sandalwood, perhaps, and the indefinable smell of power. "Your brother, he has this money readily available?" Maya's chin lifted, pride warring with desperation. "That's not your business." "Perhaps not." Jinwoo reached into his jacket, and Maya tensed, but he only pulled out a leather checkbook. "However, you made it my business when you asked for help. $847, you said, for the ICU authorization." Maya stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You can't be serious. I don't even know who you are. Normal people don't just show up at hospitals in the middle of the night offering money to strangers." Jinwoo's mouth curved in what might have been a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No, they do not. But then, I suspect we have both established that I'm not normal people. The question is whether your grandmother's life is worth accepting help from someone who is precisely as dangerous as you are intelligent enough to suspect I am." The machines continued their steady rhythm, marking time while Maya's world tilted on its axis. Outside the window, Portland slept, unaware that her 2 a.m. text to the wrong number had just brought something dark and elegant and utterly unrecognizable into her carefully controlled life. She looked at this man, Jinwoo Park, who spoke like a scholar and moved like violence wrapped in expensive silk, and realized that saying yes to his money might be the smartest or most foolish thing she'd ever done. The car that arrived for Maya at precisely 6 o'clock was nothing like what she'd expected. Sleek, black, with windows tinted dark enough to hide secrets, and a driver who nodded politely but said nothing during the 40-minute drive through Portland's winding hills. Maya clutched her single duffel bag and tried not to think about how the leather seats probably cost more than her monthly rent. When they passed through gates that looked more like military checkpoint than residential entrance, Maya's stomach tightened with the first real understanding of what she'd agreed to. Security cameras tracked their progress up a winding drive lined with perfectly manicured landscaping that seemed designed to be beautiful and impenetrable in equal measure. The compound, when it finally came into view, made Maya's breath catch in her throat. It wasn't a house. It was a statement carved in stone and glass, rising from the hillside like something that had grown there over centuries rather than been built by human hands. Traditional Korean architectural elements blended seamlessly with modern luxury. creating spaces that felt both ancient and cutting-edge. Curved rooflines flowed into clean geometric lines, while gardens that belonged in art museums surrounded courtyards designed for both beauty and strategic defense. Maya stepped out of the car into air that smelled of pine, expensive flowers, and something else she couldn't identify. Power, perhaps. The kind that came from resources so vast they bent reality around them. Jinwoo waited on the stone steps leading to the main entrance, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt that somehow managed to look both casual and formal. Even here, in what should have been his most relaxed environment, he carried himself with that controlled authority that made Maya's pulse quicken despite her wariness. "Welcome to my home, Miss Williams," he said, descending the steps with fluid grace. "I trust the drive was acceptable." Maya shouldered her duffel bag, refusing the offer of help that flickered in his dark eyes. "It was fine. This place is beautiful and enormous. How many people live here?" Jinwoo's mouth curved in what might have been amusement. "Currently? Myself, my brother, and essential staff. After tonight, you." He gestured toward the entrance, and Maya noticed how the heavy wooden doors seemed to open without anyone touching them. Security systems hidden everywhere, she realized. The kind that tracked movement and anticipated needs before they were expressed. Inside, Maya tried not to gawk like a tourist. The entry hall alone was larger than her entire apartment, with soaring ceilings supported by dark wooden beams and floors that looked like they'd been carved from single pieces of marble. Art covered the walls, pieces that Maya suspected belonged to museums rather than private homes. Everything spoke of wealth accumulated over generations, tastefully displayed and ruthlessly protected. "Your room is in the East Wing," Jinwoo said, leading her through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. "Connected to my brother's suite, but with complete privacy. You will have access to the kitchen, library, gardens, and pool during daylight hours. Other areas require permission or escort." Maya's nursing instincts kicked in, overriding her amazement at the surroundings. What's his mobility level right now? Is he using assistive devices? Has he been getting physical therapy? He has been receiving therapy, though not as consistently as his medical team recommends. Taemin can be stubborn about accepting help. Jinwoo paused outside an elegantly carved door, his expression growing more complex. He was not always like this. Before the shooting, my brother was outgoing, trusting. Now he sees medical professionals as reminders of his vulnerability. Maya heard the pain beneath Jinwoo's controlled tone and felt something shift in her chest. Whatever else he might be, this man clearly loved his brother deeply. That kind of protective devotion was something she understood completely. "Has he been told I'm coming?" she asked. "He has been informed that we are trying a new approach." Jinwoo's dark eyes met hers with an intensity that made her suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "I have explained that you are different from the others, that you understand strength comes in many forms." Before Maya could ask what that meant, Jinwoo opened the door to reveal a room that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that seemed to glow in the evening light. A king-size bed with linens that looked like silk dominated one wall, while a sitting area arranged around a fireplace created an intimate space that felt more like a luxury hotel suite than a guest room. French doors opened onto a private balcony, and Maya could see another set of doors across a shared courtyard. "My brother's room," Jinwoo said, following her gaze. "Connected but separate. You can reach him quickly if needed, but you both maintain privacy." Maya set down her duffel bag, running her fingers along furniture that felt solid and expensive under her touch. "This is beautiful, but it's too much. I'm here to work, not vacation in luxury." "You are here to heal my brother," Jinwoo said quietly. "That requires your own peace of mind. Comfort is not luxury, Miss Williams. It is necessity." Before Maya could argue, a door chimed softly somewhere in the suite. Jinwoo checked his phone with the kind of automatic precision that suggested he was never truly off duty. "Dinner's ready. You can meet Taemin now, if you feel prepared." Maya straightened her shoulders, shifting into professional mode. "I'm ready." Jinwoo led her through the connecting courtyard to another set of French doors. Inside, Maya found a room that mirrored her own in layout but felt completely different in energy. Where her room was serene and welcoming, this space crackled with frustration and restless energy. Medical equipment was pushed into corners like it was being punished, and the man, sitting in the electric wheelchair near the windows, radiated the kind of controlled anger Maya recognized from every difficult patient she'd ever treated. Tamien Park was younger than his brother, but carried the same sharp intelligence in his dark eyes. His face was leaner, marked by the kind of weight loss that came from trauma and recovery, but Maya could see the family resemblance in his bone structure and the stubborn set of his jaw. He wore expensive casual clothes that somehow managed to look disheveled, and when he turned to look at them, Maya felt the full force of his resentment like a physical blow. "So you're the new nurse my brother hired to babysit me," Tamien said, his English accented but fluent. "How long before you quit like the others?" Maya stepped forward before Jinwoo could respond, her professional training taking over. "I'm Maya Williams, and I'm here because your brother is worried about you. But I'm not here to babysit anyone. I'm here to help you get strong enough that you don't need anyone hovering over you ever again." Something flickered in Tamien's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or the first hint of interest. "Most people, they treat me like I am broken. Like being shot made me stupid as well as weak." Maya moved closer, studying his posture and the way he held himself in the chair. Her nursing experience cataloged details automatically. Muscle tension that spoke of pain he wasn't admitting, defensive body language that screamed vulnerability beneath the anger, eyes that were too bright with the kind of frustrated energy that came from a mind trapped in a healing body. "Being shot didn't make you anything except temporarily inconvenienced," she said matter-of-factly. "Your brother told me you were strong before this happened. Nothing about bullets changes who you are inside. They just slow you down for a while." Tamien stared at her for a long moment, and Maya became aware of Jinwoo watching the interaction with laser focus. Testing, she realized. He was evaluating whether she could handle his brother's resistance, whether she would fold under pressure like the others. "You talk like you know something about being shot," Tamien said finally. "No, but I know about recovery. I know about being angry when your body won't do what your mind wants it to do. And I know the difference between giving up and taking time to heal properly." Maya pulled up a chair and sat down on eye level with him, a gesture that made Tamien's defensive posture relax slightly. "I also know that the fastest way to get your independence back is to stop fighting the people trying to help you get there." For the first time since they'd entered the room, Tamien's angry expression cracked slightly. Behind Jinwoo, Maya heard the soft chime that seemed to signal household communications. "Dinner is served," Jinwoo said. "Tamien, will you join us? Or would you prefer a tray in your room?" "I will come to the dining room," Tamien said, maneuvering his wheelchair with practiced efficiency. "But only because I want to see if she talks the same way when she is not trying to impress you." Maya caught Jinwoo's subtle smile as they followed Tamien through corridors that seemed designed for wheelchair accessibility without sacrificing elegance. The dining room continued the home's theme of understated luxury, with a table that could seat 12 but was set intimately for 3. Jinwoo held Maya's chair with old-fashioned courtesy that somehow didn't feel performative, and she caught that scent again. Sandalwood and something uniquely him, warm and masculine and completely distracting. "Tell me about your grandmother," Tamien said as servers appeared with food that looked like art and smelled like heaven. "Jinwoo says you're working many jobs to pay for her care." Maya glanced at Jinwoo, surprised he'd shared personal information. "She's the woman who raised me after my parents died. Worked 3 jobs to put me through nursing school. Never complained about the sacrifices. Now she's the one who needs care, and I'm trying to return the favor." "Family loyalty," Tamien said, nodding approval. "This I understand. In our culture, caring for elders is not burden but honor." Maya found herself relaxing despite the surreal circumstances of dining in elegant splendor with 2 men who clearly existed in a world completely different from her own. The food was incredible, some fusion of Korean and Pacific Northwest cuisines that made her realize she'd been surviving on hospital cafeteria food and whatever was cheapest for too long. "You cook well," she said to Jinwoo. I do not cook. Jinwoo's dark eyes held that hint of amusement again. We employ a chef who takes pride in accommodating diverse tastes. Of course you do, Maya murmured, taking another bite of what might have been the best meal of her life. Do you employ people to tie your shoes to? This time Jinwoo actually smiled, a real one that transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made Maya's pulse skip. I am capable of managing my own footwear, Miss Williams. Taemin laughed, the first genuinely happy sound Maya had heard from him. She's not impressed by your money, Hyung. I like her. Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks and focused on her dinner, acutely aware of Jinwoo's attention on her like a physical touch. The conversation flowed easier after that, touching on safe subjects like Portland's weather and Taemin's progress in physical therapy. But Maya found herself studying Jinwoo when she thought he wasn't looking, noting the way he monitored his brother's energy level without being obvious about it, how he subtly ensured Maya's water glass stayed full, and that she got the choicest portions of each dish. When Taemin began showing signs of fatigue, Jinwoo suggested he retire for the evening. Maya started to follow, ready to help with the transition from wheelchair to bed, but Taemin waved her off. I can manage my own bedtime routine. Tomorrow we will discuss my therapy schedule and what you think I need to do differently. But tonight, I'm tired of being a patient. Maya nodded, understanding the need for dignity even in vulnerability. As Taemin wheeled himself back to his room, she found herself alone with Jinwoo in the elegant dining room, suddenly hyper-aware of the intimacy of sharing a meal with him. He likes you, Jinwoo said quietly. This is more progress than we have seen in weeks. He's frustrated and scared, but he's not broken. Maya stood to help clear dishes, but Jinwoo's hand on her wrist stopped her. The touch was brief, professional, but it sent electricity shooting up her arm. The staff will handle this. You're not here as domestic help, Miss Williams. Maya looked down at his hand, still resting lightly on her wrist, and felt something shift between them. The air seemed thicker suddenly, charged with an awareness that had nothing to do with their professional arrangement and everything to do with the way his dark eyes had been studying her all evening. I should check on my grandmother, she said, pulling her hand free with more effort than it should have required. Make sure she's settling in okay for the night. Jinwoo nodded, stepping back to give her space. Your phone will work throughout the compound. If you need anything during the night, there is a service button in your room that will bring assistance immediately. Maya headed toward her suite, acutely aware of Jinwoo watching her go. When she reached her doors, she turned back to find him still standing in the dining room doorway, his figure silhouetted against the warm light like something out of classical painting. Thank you, she called softly. For dinner, for my room, for trusting me with your brother. This whole situation is surreal, but you've been more considerate than you needed to be. Jinwoo's expression softened in ways that made him look younger, more approachable. Good night, Miss Williams. Rest well. Maya closed her doors and leaned against them, her heart hammering with reactions she didn't want to analyze. Outside her windows, the gardens glowed with subtle lighting that made everything look magical and slightly unreal. She pulled out her phone to call Grandma Essie's night nurse, but found herself thinking about Jinwoo's smile across the dinner table, the way his hand had fell on her wrist, the scent of sandalwood and danger that seemed to cling to everything he touched. She was in trouble, Maya realized, not just because she was living in a compound with security measures that belonged in action movies, not just because she was caring for a gunshot victim whose recovery seemed tied to family secrets she couldn't begin to imagine. She was in trouble because Jinwoo Park was nothing like what she'd expected, and everything about him made her want to understand the man behind the dangerous reputation and expensive suits. As she settled in a bed that felt like sleeping on clouds, Maya wondered if agreeing to 6 months in this beautiful, terrifying place had been the smartest decision of her life or the most dangerous. Either way, there was no going back now. 3 weeks in her stay at the compound, Maya had fallen into a routine that felt almost normal if she ignored the security cameras tracking her every movement and the way Jinwoo's men materialized from shadows whenever she ventured outside. Tamin's progress had been remarkable once he'd accepted that she wasn't there to coddle him, but to push him toward independence. His physical therapy sessions had evolved into collaborative planning sessions where Maya let him set goals and she provided the medical expertise to achieve them safely. What she hadn't expected was how easily she'd adapted to dining with Jinwoo each evening, their conversations ranging from Tamin's care to literature, current events, and the subtle complexities of running what she was beginning to understand was a vast business empire. Jinwoo never explicitly discussed the nature of his work, but Maya caught glimpses in overheard phone conversations conducted in rapid Korean, the deference of his staff, and the way certain topics made his expression go carefully blank. She also hadn't expected the way her pulse quickened whenever Jinwoo entered a room, or how she found herself cataloging details about him like a medical professional studying a fascinating case. The way he moved with deadly grace even in casual moments. How his rare smiles transformed his entire face. The scent of sandalwood and power that seemed to cling to everything he touched, including her dreams. Maya was reviewing Tamin's latest physical therapy notes when Jinwoo appeared in the doorway of the medical suite they'd converted for her use. Something in his expression made her look up sharply from her charts. "We need to discuss a security concern," he said, closing the door behind him with the kind of deliberate care that made Maya's stomach tighten with warning. "What kind of concern?" Maya set down her pen, noting the controlled tension in Jinwoo's shoulders, the way his dark eyes kept flicking to the windows as if calculating escape routes. "Someone has been asking questions about you. Your employment here, your relationship to my family, your importance to our household operations." Jinwoo moved to the windows, checking sightlines with practiced efficiency. "These inquiries suggest our arrangement is no longer as private as intended." Maya's nursing training kicked in, the part that dealt with crisis situations and hostile patients. "How dangerous is this situation? Should I be worried about my grandmother's safety? Your grandmother's hospital security has been quietly enhanced. She is protected without being aware additional measures are in place." Jinwoo turned from the window, and Maya caught something in his expression that made her pulse stutter. "It is your safety that concerns me more immediately." Before Maya could ask what that meant, Jinwoo's phone buzzed with an urgency that made him answer immediately. The conversation was brief, conducted in Korean, but Maya didn't need to understand the language to recognize the tone of crisis management and tactical planning. "We need to modify your routine," Jinwoo said after ending the call. "No more unescorted trips to gather medical supplies. No more walks in the garden during evening hours. Until this situation is resolved, your movements will be restricted to the main house with constant security presence." Maya stood, her professional instincts warring with growing alarm. "Jinwoo, what exactly are you not telling me? Who's asking questions, and why do they care about me?" The pause that followed stretched long enough for Maya to hear her own heartbeat. When Jinwoo spoke again, his voice carried a weight that seemed to settle in the room like expensive cologne mixed with gunpowder. "My business involves territories and alliances that must be maintained through careful balance of power. There are those who would view any perceived vulnerability in my organization as an opportunity to advance their own interests." Jinwoo moved closer, and Maya caught that familiar scent of sandalwood and danger. "Your presence here, your obvious importance to my brother's recovery, makes you a potential target for anyone seeking leverage against me." Maya's mind raced through the implications. "You're saying someone might hurt me to get to you? That my agreement to help Tamin has made me a target in some kind of criminal power struggle?" "Yes." Jinwoo's honesty was stark, uncompromising. "I am saying that my protection of you is no longer merely contractual obligation. It is necessity for your survival and my peace of mind." Something in his tone made Maya's breath catch. The way he'd said protection of you carried undertones that had nothing to do with employment contracts and everything to do with the dangerous awareness that had been building between them for weeks. Before she could process what that meant, alarms began chiming throughout the compound. Not the soft electronic sounds of household communications, but harsh, urgent warnings that made Jinwoo's expression go deadly cold. "Stay here," he commanded, moving toward the door with fluid lethality. Do not leave this room under any circumstances. But Maya was already grabbing her medical bag, her nursing training overriding everything else. If someone's hurt, I can help. That's what I'm here for. Jinwoo caught her wrist as she tried to pass him, his grip gentle but absolutely unbreakable. Miss Williams. Maya, you're not here as trauma nurse for battlefield casualties. You are here because I need you safe and whole and alive. The way he said her name, the raw intensity in his dark eyes, made Maya realize how much her safety meant to him beyond their professional arrangement. But before she could respond, the door burst open and one of Jinwoo's security team appeared, speaking rapid Korean that made Jinwoo's face go blank with cold fury. What is it? Maya demanded, recognizing the cadence of crisis reporting even without understanding the words. An attempt was made on your life during what should have been a routine medical supply pickup. Jinwoo's voice was controlled, professional, but Maya caught the tremor of barely leashed violence beneath the surface. The driver you requested supplies from was not our usual contact. He had been compromised, paid to deliver you to parties interested in using you as leverage against me. Maya's legs felt suddenly unsteady. Someone tried to kidnap me? Today? While I was just trying to get antibiotics for Tamien. The attempt was prevented. Our security protocols identified the threat and neutralized it before you were placed in direct danger. Jinwoo moved closer, his presence both comforting and absolutely terrifying in its controlled lethality. But the fact that such an attempt was made confirms what I have suspected. You are no longer safe outside these walls under any circumstances. Maya sank into the nearest chair, her mind struggling to process the reality of living in a world where routine errands could become assassination attempts. This is insane. 3 weeks ago, I was worried about overtime shifts and medical bills. Now someone wants to kidnap me because I'm taking care of your brother? Not because you are caring for my brother. Jinwoo knelt beside her chair, bringing himself to eye level with an intimacy that made Maya's breath catch despite everything. Because you have become important to me personally. Because anyone observing my behavior toward you would recognize that harming you would cause me considerable pain. The admission hung between them like a live wire, crackling with implications neither of them was ready to fully acknowledge. Maya stared into Jinwoo's dark eyes, seeing past the controlled surface to something vulnerable and fierce and absolutely determined. Jinwoo, she whispered, her professional composure finally cracking under the weight of everything she'd been trying to ignore. This isn't just about the contract anymore, is it? Before he could answer, another alarm chimed and Tamien's voice came through the room's communication system, tight with pain and frustration. Hyung, I need Maya. Something is wrong with my shoulder, and the pain medication isn't helping. Maya was on her feet instantly, professional training overriding everything else. Jinwoo caught her arm as she headed for the door. I will escort you. But Maya, what happened today changes everything. You cannot continue to move through this world as if you are merely a hired nurse. You are under my protection now in every sense of that phrase. The way he said protection sent heat racing through Maya's veins despite the circumstances. She nodded, grabbing her medical supplies and trying to focus on Tamien's immediate needs rather than the way Jinwoo's presence beside her made her feel both completely safe and utterly endangered. Tamien's room was a controlled chaos of medical equipment and frustrated energy. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, face pale with pain, trying to manipulate his shoulder through what looked like muscle spasms. How long has this been building? Maya asked, moving into assessment mode as Jinwoo positioned himself where he could monitor both the door and the windows. Since this afternoon. It started as tightness. Now it feels like someone is twisting knives between my shoulder blades. Tamien's English was strained with discomfort, and Maya could see the effort it took for him to maintain composure. Maya's hands moved with professional confidence, palpating muscle groups and checking range of motion while her mind cataloged symptoms. Stress-induced muscle tension, exacerbated by the underlying scar tissue from his gunshot wounds. The kind of physical manifestation that happened when someone's body processed fear and adrenaline it couldn't otherwise express. "You heard about what happened today, didn't you?" she asked gently, working pressure points that made Tameen wince and then relax slightly. "Jin Woo told me someone tried to use you against him, that you were in danger because you were helping me recover." Tameen's voice carried guilt that made Maya's heart ache. "This is my fault. If I had not been shot, if I did not need care, you would be safe in your normal life." Maya paused her treatment, looking directly into Tameen's eyes with the kind of fierce compassion that had made her an effective nurse. "Your recovery is not the problem here. The problem is that there are people in the world who think hurting innocent people is an acceptable way to gain power over others. You didn't create that situation, and you're not responsible for fixing it. But you came here to help me, and now you are trapped in danger because of choices I cannot change." "I came here to help you," Maya agreed, resuming her work on his knotted muscles. "And that's exactly what I'm doing. The rest of this, the security concerns and external threats, that's not about our professional relationship. That's about something else entirely." She caught Jinwoo's sharp glance at her words and felt heat rise in her cheeks. But it was true. Somewhere in the past 3 weeks, her feelings for Jinwoo had evolved far beyond professional courtesy or even reluctant attraction. The man who wrote medical expense checks without blinking, who watched her work with his brother with something approaching reverence, who spoke to her as an intellectual equal while treating her with old-fashioned courtesy, had become someone she couldn't imagine walking away from. The thought terrified her almost as much as the assassination attempt. As Maya worked to relieve Tameen's pain, she became aware of Jinwoo's presence like a physical weight. The way he monitored the room's security while simultaneously tracking her every movement. How his jaw tightened when Tameen mentioned guilt about her situation. The controlled violence that seemed to radiate from him like heat whenever the topic of threats against her came up. When Tameen finally relaxed into pain-free sleep, Maya found herself alone with Jinwoo in the quiet medical suite. The events of the day hung between them like smoke, heavy with implications neither seemed ready to address directly. "Will you tell me about your business now?" Maya asked, cleaning her hands with the kind of deliberate focus that helped her process stress. "The real business, not the carefully worded explanations you've been giving me." Jinwoo was quiet for so long Maya thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weariness that made him seem younger and infinitely more human. "My family has been involved in import and export operations for 3 generations. We facilitate movement of goods and services that exist in legal gray areas, maintain territorial agreements with other organizations, and occasionally resolve disputes that cannot be addressed through conventional legal channels." Jinwoo moved to the windows, his reflection ghost-like in the dark glass. "What you would call organized crime, though we prefer to think of ourselves as businessmen operating in markets where traditional law enforcement is ineffective." Maya absorbed this, trying to reconcile the elegant, considerate man she'd been sharing dinners with for weeks with the reality of criminal enterprise. "Are you telling me you're actually dangerous? That the reputation and security measures aren't just paranoia? I'm telling you that the world I operate in has consequences that extend beyond business meetings and financial transactions. That the shooting of my brother was not random violence, but a calculated attack meant to weaken my organization's position. And that your association with me has now made you a target for anyone seeking to exploit perceived vulnerabilities in my personal life." Maya turned to face him directly, studying his profile against the dark windows. "And is that what I am? A vulnerability in your personal life?" Jinwoo's reflection met her eyes in the glass, and Maya saw something there that made her pulse stutter with recognition and fear and want all tangled together. "You have become far more than I intended when I made my offer in the hospital," he said quietly. "Far more important than any business arrangement should allow." Before Maya could respond to that admission, Jinwoo's phone buzzed with another urgent communication. His expression went cold as he listened, and Maya caught enough Korean to recognize words that sounded like threats and deadlines. "What now?" she asked as he ended the call. "The organization responsible for today's attempt has made contact. They are offering terms for your safe return to normal life. Jinwoo turned from the window, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. They believe you are my weakness. They believe, threatening, you will make me compromise my business interests to ensure your safety. Maya's chin lifted with the same stubborn strength that had carried her through nursing school and years of impossible challenges. Are they right? Am I your weakness? Jinwoo moved closer, close enough that Maya could smell sandalwood and the faint scent of expensive soap, close enough to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes and the way his carefully controlled expression cracked just slightly at the edges. You have become my strength, Miss Williams, which makes you infinitely more dangerous to me than any weakness could be. The admission hung between them like a confession, heavy with implications that made Maya's heart race despite the circumstances. She realized she was about to respond when alarms began chiming again, this time with a pattern that made Jinwoo's expression go deadly cold. They are moving faster than anticipated, he said, checking his phone with fluid efficiency. The compound is secure, but we must assume they will escalate their approach. Maya, I need you to understand that what happens next may require choices neither of us wants to make. Maya looked into his dark eyes, seeing past the controlled surface to the man who had materialized in her life like something out of a fever dream, offering salvation wrapped in silk and shadows. Whatever those choices were, whatever came next in this dangerous world, she'd stumbled into through a wrong number text. She realized she trusted him to keep her safe. More than that, she realized she wanted to keep him safe too, this elegant, dangerous man who looked at her like she was something precious and irreplaceable. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, as alarms continued their urgent chorus and Jinwoo began coordinating security responses with lethal efficiency, Maya felt something settle into place in her chest. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The crisis began at 4:30 in the morning when Taemin's fever spiked to dangerous levels and Maya realized they were out of the specific antibiotics needed to prevent his surgical sites from developing serious infection. Jinwoo was in an emergency video conference with business contacts in Seoul, coordinating responses to the escalating threats against their organization, and Maya made the decision that would change everything. She couldn't wait for security protocols. Taemin needed medication now, not in the hours it would take to arrange properly vetted transportation and sourcing. Maya had memorized the compound's emergency supply procedures during her first week, and the closest 24-hour pharmacy was only 12 minutes away with a driver who knew the route. What could go wrong in 12 minutes? Everything, as it turned out. Maya was reviewing Taemin's temperature readings when the van pulled away from the pharmacy loading dock, her medical bag heavy with antibiotics and additional supplies. She didn't notice when the driver took a different route back to the compound. Didn't register the warning signs until they'd been driving for 20 minutes through parts of Portland she didn't recognize. "Excuse me," she said, leaning forward toward the partition separating her from the driver. "I think we missed the turn for the compound. This doesn't look like the right direction." The man who turned to look at her wasn't the security driver she'd expected. His face was unfamiliar, cold, with the kind of professional indifference that made Maya's blood turn to ice water. "Change of plans, lady." The voice was wrong, accented differently than Jinwoo's staff. "We're taking a little detour first." Maya's nursing training kicked in, the part that dealt with psychiatric patients in hostile situations. Her phone was in her bag, but reaching for it would signal panic. Better to assess the situation, look for opportunities, maintain calm until she understood exactly what she was facing. "I need to get back to my patient. He has a serious infection and requires immediate treatment." Maya kept her voice level, professional, the tone she used with difficult patients who might become violent if handled incorrectly. "Your patient will have to wait." The man pulled out a phone, speaking in rapid Korean that Maya caught enough of to understand they were confirming a successful pickup. Her stomach lurched with the realization that this wasn't random. This was planned, coordinated, exactly the kind of threat Jinwoo had been trying to protect her from. The van stopped in an industrial area filled with warehouses and loading docks. the kind of place where someone could scream without being heard. Maya was escorted into a building that smelled of motor oil and something else she didn't want to identify. Her medical bag confiscated, but not her phone, which meant either her captors were amateurs or they wanted Jinwoo to be able to track her location. The room they put her in was sparse, but not uncomfortable. A chair, a table, windows too high and small to escape through. Maya settled herself in the chair and began cataloging everything she could observe. 3 men visible, possibly more outside. Korean speakers, but not from the same region as Jinwoo based on accent differences. Armed, but not overtly threatening, which suggested they needed her alive and unharmed for whatever leverage they hoped to gain. One of them, older and better dressed than the others, entered the room with the kind of confident authority that marked him as leadership. "Miss Williams," he said, his English heavily accented but clear. "I am Kim Hyun-soo. You are not in danger if you cooperate with our requirements. We need your friend Mr. Park to understand that his recent business decisions have consequences." Maya studied him with the same clinical assessment she used on patients, noting stress markers in his posture and the way his eyes kept shifting to his phone. Whatever they were planning, they were operating under time pressure. "What kind of consequences?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "And what does any of this have to do with me?" "Mr. Park values you. This makes you useful for ensuring his attention and compliance." Kim moved to the window, checking something outside. "When he receives confirmation of your situation, he will be more willing to negotiate territorial agreements that benefit our organization." Maya's mind raced through options. She was a nurse, not a tactical expert, but she understood human psychology and stress responses. These men needed her cooperation, which gave her more power than they realized. "How long do you plan to keep me here?" "My patient has a serious medical condition. Without treatment, he could develop sepsis, which can be fatal. Jinwoo isn't going to negotiate anything if his brother dies because I'm not there to provide care." Kim's expression flickered with something that might have been uncertainty. "Your patient will receive medical attention from other sources. Our concern is ensuring Mr. Park understands the seriousness of our position." Maya stood, moving with the kind of confident authority she used when dealing with difficult patients and stressed family members. "Mr. Kim, I'm going to explain something to you from a medical perspective. Taemin Park was shot 6 weeks ago. His recovery has been complicated by infection risks that require specific monitoring and treatment protocols. Without proper care, he could be dead in hours, not days. And if that happens, Jinwoo Park won't be focused on business negotiations. He'll be focused on killing everyone responsible for his brother's death." For the first time, Kim looked genuinely concerned. Maya pressed her advantage, moving closer with the kind of calm confidence that had carried her through every medical crisis she'd ever handled. "But if you let me call him and explain that I'm safe and that Taemin needs immediate medical attention, Jinwoo will be thinking clearly enough to have the kind of rational business discussion you want. Dead brothers make for very irrational business partners." Kim considered this, checking his phone again. Something was making him nervous, and Maya filed that observation away for potential use. After a long moment, he nodded. "One call, to explain your situation and his brother's medical needs. Nothing else." Maya pulled out her phone with hands that stayed perfectly steady despite the adrenaline racing through her system. Jinwoo answered on the first ring, his voice tight with controlled panic that made her chest ache. "Maya, where are you? Are you injured?" "I'm Fina. I'm with some business associates of yours who want to discuss territorial agreements." Maya met Kim's eyes, seeing approval in his expression. "But Jinwoo, Taemin needs antibiotics immediately. His fever spiked, and without treatment he'll develop sepsis. You need to get medical attention to him right now." The pause that followed was long enough for Maya to hear Jinwoo processing both her safety and his brother's crisis. When he spoke again, his voice carried a deadly calm that made her shiver. "Understood. Medical care will be provided immediately. Maya, are you able to tell me anything else about your current situation?" Maya looked at Kim, who was monitoring the call, but seemed satisfied with her cooperation. "I'm in a warehouse district. Industrial area, lots of loading docks. The building smells like motor oil. I can hear highway traffic, but it's distant. The phone went quiet. Maya realized Jinwoo had ended the call and was already coordinating whatever response he considered appropriate to her situation. Over the next hour, Maya learned exactly what kind of man Jinwoo Park became when someone threatened what he valued most. Kim's phone began ringing with increasing frequency. Conversations that started confident and became increasingly tense. Maya caught enough Korean to understand that Jinwoo's response was swift, comprehensive, and absolutely terrifying to her captors. "He is moving too quickly," Kim said after ending another call, his previous confidence replaced by growing panic. "Our sources say he has mobilized resources that should not be possible to coordinate this fast." Maya felt a fierce pride, mixed with genuine fear. She'd seen glimpses of Jinwoo's controlled authority, but this was something else entirely. This was the man who commanded an organization powerful enough that kidnapping someone he cared about was being met with the kind of response that made seasoned criminals nervous. "What kind of resources?" she asked, though she suspected she didn't want to know the answer. Before Kim could respond, the lights went out. In the darkness that followed, Maya heard sounds that made her nurse's knowledge of trauma responses kick into overdrive. Gunfire. Short, controlled bursts followed by silence. Voices shouting in Korean, some panicked, others giving what sounded like tactical orders. The unmistakable sound of vehicles arriving at high speed. Kim grabbed Maya's arm, pulling her toward what she assumed was a back exit. But Maya had spent the hour memorizing the room's layout, and when he stumbled slightly in the darkness, she was ready. Her elbow caught him in the solar plexus with the kind of precision that came from years of restraining combative patience. As Kim doubled over, Maya grabbed the keys from his belt and ran toward where she remembered seeing a supply closet. If Jinwoo was conducting some kind of rescue operation, she needed to be somewhere defensible until he could reach her. The closet was small, cramped with industrial supplies, but it had a lock and no windows for anyone to shoot through. Maya barricaded herself inside and tried to control her breathing while gunfire continued in sporadic bursts throughout the building. When silence finally fell, Maya waited. Her nursing training had taught her that the most dangerous moment in any crisis was often right after it seemed to be over, when people made assumptions about safety that got them killed. The voice that called her name 20 minutes later made her knees weak with relief. "Maya, Maya, if you can hear me, please respond. I need to know you are safe." "Jinwoo." Maya unlocked the closet door with hands that shook slightly from adrenaline crash. "Jinwoo, I'm here. I'm in the supply closet near the back of the building." The footsteps that approached were careful, controlled, but Maya could hear the underlying urgency. When Jinwoo appeared in the doorway, Maya's breath caught at the sight of him. This was not the elegantly dressed businessman she'd been sharing dinners with for weeks. This was someone else entirely, someone dressed in dark tactical clothing with equipment she didn't want to identify. His face was coldly beautiful in the emergency lighting, but his eyes held a relief so profound it made Maya realize how terrified he must have been. "Are you injured?" he asked, his hands moving over her with professional efficiency, checking for wounds or trauma with the kind of thoroughness that suggested medical training. "I'm fine. Scared but fine. How's Taemin?" Maya searched Jinwoo's face, noting the controlled exhaustion that spoke of hours spent coordinating multiple crisis responses simultaneously. "Stable. The antibiotics were administered in time to prevent serious complications." Jinwoo's hands stilled on her shoulders, his dark eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her forget they were standing in a warehouse that smelled like gunpowder and fear. "Maya, I need you to understand something. What I did tonight, the resources I mobilized to find you, the methods I used to ensure your safety, this is who I am when someone threatens what I cannot afford to lose." Maya stared into his eyes, seeing past the controlled surface to something raw and desperate and absolutely devoted. The scent of sandalwood was mixed with tactical gear and adrenaline, but underneath it all was the same warmth that had been drawing her to him for weeks. "Jinwoo," she whispered, reaching up to touch his face with hands that were steadier than they had any right to be. "I know who you are. I've known for weeks, and I'm not afraid of you." "You should be," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotions he'd been holding in check for hours. "I kill people tonight, Maya. To get to you, to ensure your safety, I did things that will have consequences for both of us." Maya studied his face, this man who had materialized in her life through a wrong number and turned her carefully controlled world upside down. The man who wrote medical expense checks like they were pocket change, who treated her like she was precious beyond price, who had apparently just waged war against a rival organization to ensure her safety. Are they dead? The men who took me? Some of them. Jinwoo's honesty was stark, uncompromising. Those who surrendered are being held for questioning. Those who chose to fight when we breached the building are no longer a threat to you or anyone else. Maya absorbed this, trying to reconcile the gentle man who brought her tea during late-night medical consultations with someone capable of coordinating what sounded like a military-style rescue operation. "I should be horrified," she said finally. "I should be running away from you as fast as possible. But you're not." "No." Maya's voice was steady, certain in a way that surprised them both. "I'm not running anywhere. I'm exactly where I want to be." Jinwoo's control finally cracked. His hands came up to frame her face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence he'd just orchestrated for her sake. "Maya," he said, her name a prayer and a confession all at once. "You have become everything I never knew I needed. Everything I cannot live without." "Then don't live without me," she whispered, rising on her toes to close the distance between them. "Because I'm not going anywhere, Jinwoo Park. Not tonight. Not in 6 months, not ever." When their lips met, Maya tasted sandalwood and danger and the salt of tears she hadn't realized either of them was crying. This was surrender and claiming all at once, the moment when protection became partnership and captivity became chosen sanctuary. As Jinwoo kissed her in the shadows of a warehouse that reeked of violence and victory, Maya realized she had found her home in the most dangerous place imaginable, in the arms of a man who would burn down the world to keep her safe. 2 weeks after the warehouse incident, Maya woke to sunlight streaming through windows that no longer made her feel like a beautiful prisoner. The external threats had been neutralized with the kind of thoroughness that came from Jinwoo's systematic approach to problem-solving. Kim Hyun-soo's organization had been dismantled, their territorial claims redistributed among more cooperative parties, and a message sent throughout Portland's underground community was clear: touching Jinwoo Park's people carried consequences that made death seem merciful. Maya padded to her balcony in bare feet, looking out over gardens that had become genuinely peaceful rather than merely secure. The scent of morning coffee drifted up from the kitchen, mixed with something that smelled like celebration. Today was significant for reasons that made her pulse quicken with anticipation and nerves in equal measure. Today, Jinwoo was formally ending their contract, not because Taemin's recovery was complete, though he'd progressed to the point where he needed minimal medical supervision. Not because the external threats required her continued protection, though Jinwoo's security measures remained comprehensive. Today marked 6 months since Maya had agreed to trade her freedom for her grandmother's medical care, and Jinwoo was honoring the original terms of their arrangement by giving her complete liberty to choose her own future. The thought terrified and exhilarated her in ways she was still learning to process. Maya found Jinwoo in the morning room, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt that somehow managed to look both casual and formal. He was reviewing documents that looked official and final, but when she entered, his attention shifted to her with the kind of focus that still made her breath catch despite weeks of growing intimacy. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying warmth that seemed to fill the elegant space. "Your grandmother called earlier. She is eager to see you this afternoon." Maya settled into the chair across from him, accepting the coffee he poured with the kind of automatic consideration that had become natural between them. How is she feeling about everything? The idea of me potentially staying here permanently? Jinwoo's dark eyes held hers with an intensity that made her realize this conversation was going to be more significant than routine morning discussion. "She is concerned for your happiness above all else." "As am I." He set down his coffee and reached for the documents he'd been reviewing. Maya recognized legal letterhead, contract language, the formal structure of business arrangements being concluded. Our original agreement specified 6 months of employment in exchange for medical expense coverage and salary compensation, Jinwoo said, his voice taking on the professional tone he used for serious business discussions. As of today, that contract is fulfilled completely. You have provided exceptional care for my brother, and all financial obligations have been met beyond the originally specified terms. Maya's heart began hammering against her ribs as Jinwoo slid the documents across the table. The top page was clearly marked as a contract termination, signed and dated, legally releasing her from any remaining obligations to his household. You're free to leave, Miss Williams. Free to return to your normal life, pursue other employment opportunities, live wherever you choose without restriction or security protocols. Jinwoo's voice remained carefully controlled, but Maya caught something underneath that sounded like barely contained vulnerability. You owe me nothing further, and I will place no pressure on you to make any decision based on gratitude or perceived obligation. Maya stared at the papers, her mind struggling to process the surreal reality of being offered complete freedom by a man she'd fallen irrevocably in love with. The man who had materialized in her life through a wrong number text, who had provided salvation wrapped in silk and shadows, who had killed people to ensure her safety and kissed her like she was precious beyond price. What if I don't want my freedom? She asked quietly. What if I want to choose to stay here, to be part of your life, to build something together that has nothing to do with contracts or medical care or financial arrangements? Jinwoo's carefully controlled expression cracked slightly, revealing something raw and hopeful and absolutely devoted beneath the surface. Then I would ask you to marry me, he said, his voice rough with emotions he'd been holding in check. Not as your employer or protector, but as the man who loves you beyond reason or sense. As your equal partner in building a life together that honors both your strength and mine. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she reached across the table to touch his face, marveling at the way this dangerous, elegant man leaned in her touch like she was everything he'd ever wanted. Jinwoo Park, she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to choose. I'm not Maya Chin Williams, the desperate nurse who texted the wrong number at 2 in the morning anymore. I'm not the woman who had to choose between pride and her grandmother's survival. I'm someone who has learned that home isn't a place, it's the person who would burn down the world to keep you safe. Yes, she whispered, watching his dark eyes fill with relief and joy and something that looked like reverence. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I choose this life with you. Yes, to partnership and equality and whatever comes next in your dangerous, beautiful world. When Jinwoo kissed her this time, Maya tasted sandalwood and morning coffee and the salt of happy tears. This was claiming and surrender all at once. The moment when protection became partnership and fear became faith in their shared future. The celebration that followed involved Taemin, who had insisted on planning an engagement party despite his recent medical crisis. Maya found herself surrounded by Jinwoo's extended family and trusted associates, people who treated her not as an outsider who had earned acceptance, but as someone who had always belonged in their complicated, dangerous, loving world. Grandma Essie arrived in the afternoon, transported by medical car, but moving under her own power for the first time in months. Maya watched her grandmother's sharp eyes assess Jinwoo with the kind of protective scrutiny that had guided Maya through childhood and adolescence. So you're the man who's been taking care of my granddaughter, Grandma Essie said, settling into the chair Jinwoo held for her with old-fashioned courtesy. The one who made sure I got the best medical treatment money could buy. I am the man who loves your granddaughter more than his own life, Jinwoo replied simply, and who hopes to spend the rest of my time proving worthy of the trust you placed in me when you raised someone so remarkable. Grandma Essie studied him for a long moment, then smiled with the kind of approval that made Maya's eyes fill with tears. Good answer, young man. Welcome to the family. As evening fell over the compound, Maya found herself standing on the terrace with Jinwoo, looking out over gardens that glowed in the soft lighting. The scent of night-blooming flowers mixed with sandalwood and a lingering warmth of celebration. creating an atmosphere that felt both magical and completely real. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd texted the right number that night? Maya asked, leaning into Jinwoo's warmth as his arms came around her from behind. Never, Jinwoo murmured against her hair. Because you were always meant to find me, Maya. The wrong number was exactly the right number. The desperate text was exactly the right prayer. Everything that brought you to me was precisely as it should have been. Maya turned in his arms, studying the face that had become more familiar and beloved than her own reflection. The man who had offered salvation when she needed it most, who had shown her that strength came in many forms, who had taught her that love could be both the safest and most dangerous thing in the world. What comes next? She asked. For us, for your business, for the life we're building together? Jinwoo's smile held promise and heat and absolute certainty. Next, we change the world together. You as my partner in every sense of the word, bringing healing and humanity to places that have known only power and violence. Me as your protector and equal, ensuring that your compassion can flourish without compromising your safety. He paused, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken with anticipation. And tonight we begin our honeymoon. Because I have waited 6 months to claim you properly, and I do not intend to wait any longer. As Jinwoo swept Maya into his arms with the kind of romantic gesture that belonged in fairy tales, she realized that sometimes the most dangerous wrong number turned out to be exactly the right choice. Sometimes salvation came disguised as captivity, and freedom was found in choosing to surrender to love that was fierce enough to reshape the world. 6 months ago, she had been a desperate nurse texting a stranger for help. Tonight, she was a woman who had found her home in the arms of the most dangerous man in Portland, who had discovered that true partnership meant being strong enough to protect each other and wise enough to choose love over fear. As they disappeared into the compound that had become her sanctuary, Maya smiled at the thought of viewers who might be watching their story unfold. Have you ever had a moment when everything changed because of one unexpected choice? When what seemed like a mistake turned into the best decision of your life? Share your story in the comments below, because sometimes the wrong number leads to exactly the right person, and sometimes the most dangerous choice is the one that saves us. In the gardens below, night-blooming flowers released their perfume into air that smelled of sandalwood and new beginnings, while Portland slept on, unaware that a nurse's desperate text had become a love story powerful enough to transform both the woman who sent it and the dangerous man who answered her call.